All right, welcome back. Here are our 8 major endocrine glands of the body. There is the pineal gland, which is in the brain, kind of back up in this region. There's a hypothalamus, which is right above the pituitary gland, right here. There's a pituitary gland itself, kind of right there. The thyroid gland, our parathyroid gland, our adrenal glands, which sit right above our kidneys, so adrenal, just above renal. There's our pancreas, and either ovaries or testes, right? Testes in the male. All right, so let's take a look at the pineal gland first. Again, it's up in this brain region. In non-avian and non-mammalian animals, the pineal gland still has photoreceptors, and it's often referred to as the third eye. So things that are non-avian, non-mammalian are things like your reptiles. So it actually has photoreceptors in it in lizards and snakes. And so it will respond to sunlight. And it's actually thought of being a way that helps set their biological clocks. In humans, our skulls are much thicker, and there's lots of brain tissue between like where the top of our heads would be, as well as hair. All of that preventing sunlight from really getting to our pineal gland, so it doesn't really set our biological clock. Ours actually is light through our eyes. However, it does still have some of that sleep-wake pattern setting. It does secrete melatonin, and many of you are probably aware that if people who have sleep disruptions will often be prescribed melatonin to take to help them fall asleep. So it's thought of as helping also somewhat set our biological clocks, even though it's not through the photoreceptors. It's not through photoreceptors. The hypothalamus is a, let me try not to move that. You can actually see as that skull spins around, that little red area, that is the hypothalamus. It consists of several nuclei, meaning it consists of several clusters of cell bodies working together. And it's going to be our major integrating link between the nervous and endocrine systems. So the hypothalamus is receiving input from the cortex, the thalamus, the limbic system, or the emotional part of our brain, as well as internal organs. And then it's sending either signals via hormones or helping connect, again, that nervous system to that nervous system for some regulation of homeostasis. So the hormones that it's producing are, you'll see there's some releasing hormones and then inhibiting hormones. So the hormone that's being produced are thyrotropin releasing hormone, growth hormone releasing hormone. There's also a growth hormone inhibiting hormone. So growth hormone releasing hormone is just that. It's going to help release growth hormone. We'll see that in a minute. And that will stimulate growth. Growth hormone inhibiting hormone does exactly the opposite. It inhibits the release of growth hormone, which inhibits growth. Right? There's corticotropin releasing hormone, again, that causes the release of corticotropin hormone. And then there's gonadotropin releasing hormone, which will cause a release of some sex hormones. Another thing to really key in on here, because people tend to get this a little confused, vasopressin and oxytocin are being produced in the hypothalamus. Say that again. Vasopressin and oxytocin are being produced in the hypothalamus. That's where they are made. They are released from the posterior pituitary. Okay? They are not made there. They are simply released there. Okay, and we'll talk more about what they do in just a minute. The pituitary gland has 2 main parts. There's an anterior pituitary. So this kind of, again, looking at it this way, here's the front of the face. So this is anterior. This is the anterior pituitary, and then this is the posterior pituitary. Now, I don't know how well you can see this, but this is the hypothalamus up here, and you'll notice that same yellowish color is coming down into the posterior pituitary. Again, the posterior pituitary is just an extension of the hypothalamus. The anterior pituitary, if you look carefully, it almost like wraps around the posterior pituitary. This is completely different tissue. This is very glandular tissue. Hormones are being produced by the cells in the anterior pituitary, and released from cells in the anterior pituitary. So that's going to be very different. It's actually developed from a developmentally different tissue as well. So the posterior pituitary is part of the nervous system. It's just an extension, again, of the hypothalamus. So it's called the neurohypophysis, again, for its neuron basis. The anterior pituitary is called the adenohypophysis because, again, it's made developmentally from very different tissues. So you'll see here the hypothalamus is going to secrete hormones that then trigger other hormones in the anterior pituitary to be released, and then these hormones that are being secreted by the anterior pituitary go into the bloodstream to affect an organ some distance away. And that's basically what this is saying. So in other words, the hypothalamus is what is controlling the anterior pituitary, right? So what we're going to see in the next few slides are going to be all these hormones that are being produced in the hypothalamus. Then the same slide will show you what is being released from the anterior pituitary, right, as a trigger, and then where it's going in the body and the effects that it's having. So let's go to the first ones to give you a better idea of what I mean. So gonadotropin releasing hormone, that is what GnRH stands for. It's gonadotropin releasing hormone. So this is being secreted by the hypothalamus. So this one is being secreted by the hypothalamus. This will go on to stimulate the release of either luteinizing hormone or follicle stimulating hormone from the anterior pituitary. So let me see how well I can write all of this. So this is being secreted by the hypothalamus. Oh, this is really hard. I'm just going to go hypo. So this is being secreted by the hypothalamus. And then these two are being secreted by, and I'm just going to put here the anterior pituitary, AP. And then these hormones, as you can see with the arrows, will go on to stimulate either ovaries or testes, depending on what the individual has. So these are going to be the organs that are being affected. Oh, I am actually impressed that these are even looking like letters right now. Organ, yay! So these are the organs. And then the effect that it has will be these things down here at the bottom row. So let's just kind of go through this. So gonadotropin releasing hormone will cause the release of luteinizing hormone. And if you have ovaries, that will cause the release that will then stimulate the ovaries to release estrogen and progesterone. It will help trigger ovulation, as well as the formation of something called the corpus luteum. We'll learn more about that when we get to the female reproductive system. Or another option is gonadotropin releasing hormone causes release of luteinizing hormone, and if the individual has testes, it will stimulate interstitial cells of the testes to secrete testosterone. So you'll see there's similarity. It just depends on whether or not you have ovaries, you're going to produce estrogen, progesterone. Male, you're going to have testes, you have testosterone, right? But kind of, again, similar. Follicle stimulating hormone, if the individual has ovaries, it will cause the formation of follicles, hence its name, follicle stimulating. If the individual has testes, that follicle stimulating hormone then stimulates sperm production. And again, either estrogen secretion or testosterone secretion, depending on which the individual has. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Let's try a few more of these. Oh, let me exit my drawing. So again, corticotropin releasing hormone, as well as vasopressin to a lesser extent. Well, so this is in the see if I can write. This is in the hypothalamus, and I'm just going to put an H here, right? So this is being released by the hypothalamus, and then this is ACTH, beta endorphin, and MSH is being released from the anterior pituitary. All of these three different things. Oh, it's a terrible circle, but at least you understand what I'm trying to do here. Depending on which one, it may have multiple kind of signaling cascade or a very simple one. So we'll go with a simple one. Corticotropin releasing hormone will cause the release of beta endorphin, and that simply gives you a feeling of euphoria. Beta endorphin, you may have heard of an endorphin rush, that kind of runner's high or that high feeling that people can get. And not drug high, but like your natural kind of high. It's your body's natural opioid. ACTH is adrenocorticotropin hormone. This acts on a part of the adrenal cortex, specifically a part called the zona fasciculata. This causes then the release of glucocorticoids from the adrenal cortex, which then these glucocorticoids, specifically cortisol, you've probably all heard of cortisol, will increase protein catabolism, or the breakdown of protein. It converts amino acids to glucose. It'll raise blood pressure. It has an anti-inflammatory effect. Sometimes you may have seen like cortisol shots for when people have inflammations. It helps redirect the immune system to more of the periphery. So like literally closer to the surface of your skin. And affects memory in an inverted U fashion. What an inverted U means is something like this, where there's some optimal level of memory with cortisol levels, right? So basically, this is going to be released during stressful situations. So think about that. During stressful situations, you're breaking down proteins, mostly because you care about having plenty of glucose for hungry muscles. So let's just say you're fighting off zombies or something. You have to make sure you have lots of glucose going to working muscles. You have a high enough blood pressure so that you can get all that blood and oxygen pumping to, again, those working muscles. You're going to redirect your immune system to, again, the periphery. So if you happen to like cut yourself as you're running away, you're not going to get an infection that then kills you, right? So that's where your immune system is going to be redistributed. Now, this does mean that like it makes you more prone to like other illnesses. And sometimes we see that when you're stressed out, sometimes you get sick. And that's a thing. And it's not so much that your immune system has been worn down, but it's been redirected to, again, more like the surface of your skin, where because your body doesn't understand that work is stressful. It thinks your head is going to get eaten by zombies. So it's trying to protect you from a physical threat, not so much chronic long-term psychological ones. But you're also going to remember that it's also going to help you remember that situation so that you might more easily recognize it in the future, so that you can avoid it, or you know how to respond to it much more quickly, which will also increase your chances of survival. This also and these kind of all tie in together too, or at least these two do. So a lot of times when we're doing something very physically exerting, it also like runner's highs, it also makes you kind of feel sort of good or elated, like it redirects your attention so that you don't quite notice that you're being hurt. I'm sure we've all had that situation where you were somewhere, you've been in this, I don't know, either a race or maybe a challenge or something like that. You didn't realize, you're like, where did I get that bruise from? Obviously, you must have hit yourself pretty hard, but you didn't even notice because your attention was diverted elsewhere to the task itself, not on every little bang and bruise, right? Again, trying to enhance your levels of survival. Melanocyte stimulating hormone, that's what MSH stands for, so it's just melanocyte stimulating hormone, stimulates melanocytes, and which will then go on to stimulate melanin. This has somewhat of an effect, a little bit like we see this a bit in pregnancy, where certain parts of the female's body will actually darken. But otherwise, it's not like all of a sudden you're stressed out and then like you get tan or something. but it does have an effect more like, again, during pregnancy, but it doesn't quite have the same effect like it might have in other animals. Exit my drawing. Another one is growth hormone releasing hormone, and I mentioned two growth hormone inhibiting hormones. So again, these are being produced by the hypothalamus, right? Which will have an effect on growth hormone, either causing its release or inhibiting its release from the anterior pituitary, right? Releasing hormone affects the release, inhibiting hormone would inhibit the release. And then our organs are our liver, skeletal muscle, cartilage, bone. And basically what it's doing is it's helping the body grow, either having more cell growth, cell division, or increasing our protein uptake, right? Because that's going to be an important building block in muscles and things like that. It also helps redirect glucose to the brain because there's growth going on. Sometimes the release of growth hormone, releasing hormone, or just simply growth hormone goes a little wacky. And we have we either have one of two conditions that can occur. You can either have gigantism or acromegaly or both. And I kind of crossed that out. My apologies. It wasn't meant to be a cross out. The difference between these two, I guess sometimes they go hand in hand, but like this individual right here, his name is Robert Wadlow. He is a giant. You can see how much taller he is from the average, male. I mean, this guy here is standing one step above him, and he still is, like, I don't know, up to his belly button kind of high. I mean, he was very, very, very tall. So he actually suffered from a growth on his anterior pituitary. So he actually never went through puberty. So none of his growth plates ever closed. So he just kept growing tall. He passed away young due to an infection because there is a finite limit to how tall we can get without it causing some problems like physiologically to our bodies. Like our bodies are not meant to grow to a certain height. It becomes more difficult to move. It can put a strain on our bones, things like that. Anyway, so that's gigantism, right? When there's this overgrowth or over-release of growth hormone. Now, acromegaly goes hand in hand with this, but basically what acromegaly is continued growth after the growth plates have closed, okay? So it's continued growth after the growth plates have closed. So what that means is that the individual can no longer grow taller or proportionally grow bigger. I mean, if you look at this individual, despite the fact he's so big, like he has fairly normal like facial features and stuff. People who are acromegalic giants, they will have very large like brows. It's like where your eyebrows are, like that bone underneath is going to be very, very thick. They have very thick jaws. Their rib cage will be barrel-like because all those bones can't grow any longer because the growth plates have already closed. So they start growing out. Okay, so that's acromegaly. It's just continued growth after the growth plate is closed. And that usually it goes hand in hand with gigantism, is that you have this overproduction or oversecretion of growth hormone causing for this increased growth of the body. All right. There's still a few more of these hormones that we need to get through, but I don't want this video to go too long. So I'm going to stop here and we will pick up with our next hormone.